Hello YouTube! Today we are going to talk about environment variables in Next.js. If you are coming from a Node.js background, you are probably really used to environment variables for things like your database connection string, which means that in your local host you can use a database in your own computer, and when we are in environments like production, your application can read those environment variables and connect itself with your production database. If you are coming from a Create React application, you know that your environment variables will be set at build time. So when you are in Jenkins, TeamCity, you set those environment variables. When your application is building, it will replace those process.env. The name of your variable. And then when you ship that application to production, well, those environment variables are already there. So any environment variable that you have in that environment will have no effect in your application, because we can also deploy React applications to a CDN, for example, where we don't have access to environment variables. Just before we start and go to code, I will ask you to make sure that you create your Next.js application and npm install crossenv and .env. They are similar, and I will show both because I know some of you are using crossenv, some others are using .env, so I will start with crossenv and then in the middle I will jump to .env to show you that they are really similar and there is no reason that you can't follow this tutorial, okay? So let's jump into VS Code. Over here in VS Code, we already have a new Next application created. We also have crossenv and .env installed. So as I said, I will start by using crossenv and I will say my step equals to build, for example. And I will copy paste this one for the start. And on the start, instead of build, I will say start. This command that I'm doing over here, it should in reality be an environment variable from your Jenkins or TeamCity or CircleCI, whatever build system you are using, okay? Even more important than that one is this one here for the start. This environment variable should be in your hosting service. For example, if you are using AWS or Azure or Google Cloud Platform, and you have, let's say, 3 environments, a development environment, a pre-production, and a production environment, each environment should have its own environment variables. Because imagine this scenario. Imagine that I have my database password equals to 1234. This has multiple problems. The first one is every time that I commit my code, I will also commit my password, which is a security risk for my company, right? The second problem is you have to have as many of those npm start as the number of environments you have, which is a bit painful, right? So the best approach is for you to go to your hosting provider, and for each environment, you set the environment variable for the database connection, the database password, and many other environment variables that you want to set. And so when your application is running, it will require process.env. The name of your environment variable, and it gets it from the environment. For our example, because we don't have Jenkins or Azure, I will use crossenv. If the need arises, I will move to .env because it's a bit clearer to read the file format. But if nothing happens, I will keep using crossenv, okay? So let me just remove this one from here, and we have my step equals to build and to start. So we can go to the only component that Next.js generates for us. We can delete all of this from here, and now create a new div. And in this div, we can say my step, right? And say that my step, it will be process.env.myStep, right? I can also do something else just for us to have a look into the console log. So I will say my step, and I will say process.env.myStep. Okay, and doing this, now I will simulate that I will run this in Jenkins with npm run build, and I will simulate that I will be running this in my Azure or AWS or Google Cloud Platform. So I will do npm start. And while that one is building and starting, what will happen is that this line will be completely undefined. Well, we will have my step, but no value for the my step. And this console log on your browser will also be undefined. In our build system over here, if I expand this one and I scroll to the top, you will see that my step has the value build. So let me open my browser just to show you what I'm saying. And if I do localhost 3000, my step is undefined. If I open the console, my step is also undefined. So in order to use environment variables in your UI components at build time in Next.js, we need to, let me just kill this one, we need to come here, create a new file called next.config.js, and let's do module.export equals to env, and everything that we have inside this env, okay, it will be an environment variable that we will use only at build time, okay? We will speak about runtime variables in a second. So everything that I put here, let's say that I have the my step, and so I can say process.env.myStep. If I want something completely hard-coded because it's always the same, let's say that my API endpoint, it's always, for example, slash my API slash version /1, okay? This is always the beginning of my API endpoint, for example. So you can hard code something over here if you want as well. If you want to grab something from your environment, you can also grab something from your environment. It's up to you, okay? So now if I run this again, because I'm setting up my step over here, now this will still run as expected in your server when it's building, but now we will see this value as well in our browser. So opening my browser and refreshing, now I have build and I have my step in the console log as build. So it's doing what we are used to in Create React app. We define environment variables at build time. We set them when our application builds, injects them inside code, and so we can consume them exactly the same way with process.env. The name of the environment variable, okay? And at the moment, I'm even keeping the same name of my step to my step. You can have different names, okay? But the one you use in code needs to be this one you have on the env, okay? So if I change this from my step to step alone, I need to go to my code and say that this will be step and this will be step if you want to have different environment names in the next.config.js and in your environment, you can do that, okay? Nothing against that. But usually I find it easier if you match the same names because it's easier to understand what matches what, but up to you, right? So now that we saw how to have build time configuration, if you have components like this one, let me show you GSSP, which means get server-side props, okay? And what I'm going to show for get server-side props also applies to get initial props, okay? So these are components that are server-side rendered, and components that are server-side rendered, they have some peculiar advantage in Next.js, which is you can have runtime configuration. So for now, I will just return div, and I will just say export const get server-side props. And as we saw last week, we need to return a function with basically props and an object in the props, right? Over here, I will just receive those props and I will just print them before we start to use the configuration, okay? So let's put props over here, null and 4 spaces. It seems good. So now, literally what we need to do is to go to the Next.js documentation and type the following: server runtime config in Next.js. And when you open the documentation, as usual, in Next.js is really, really good. So we can have runtime configuration that is only available to our server, and we can have public runtime configuration, which is available for both our get server-side props and get initial props, and our UI code. So let me just copy this to be a bit faster. And I will copy this, go to the next config.js, and let's call it my secret is even a good one. So let's keep that one as my secret, and this one, instead of being over there, let's say that we want that one over here, okay? And now my secret, we can even go to package.lock and say my secret equals to 1234, for example. This is our database password, let's imagine, okay? So, as I said, I like to use the same name on the key in this module in next.js.config and my environment variables. So I will do env.mySecret, so they have exactly the same name. It's easier for me to track, right? And so now I can go to the Next.js configuration and check how to use that. And the way to use that is quite easy. We just import, and let me just zoom this for you if you are on mobile, sorry. So we just import this from next/config, and then we do this config, and we can start to use those in the server side or in the client side. So we can copy this bit and go to our GSSP component. And if we do this over there, we can see that we retrieve the server runtime config and the public runtime config. Over here, I can say that I will grab my secret. Okay, so in the server side, I will say my secret. In the public runtime, I will say API endpoint. I think that's what I called it. If not, I will change right now. And I think it was API endpoint. It was. Okay, so I'm setting my secret already. Let's just set my secret as 1234. And you may be asking, oh, Bruno, why don't you set it also on build? Well, this is just runtime configuration, so we don't need this at build time. And that's the reason I'm not putting it over here. So you don't need to put this in your Jenkins as well. Okay, so if we come here, we can just first see it running, and I will just make it run. Okay, and so while it is going to run and to build, then we can go to our application and see that we will have my secret not available at the front end, okay, but we will have the API endpoint available at the front end. So we go over here, we refresh this page in /GSSP, and basically I don't have anything over here, right? It's undefined. So, but I have already the runtime configuration for my front end, which is the public one. This is good. We can go over here and now do the following. We can say pre, just to be a bit nicer, the formatting. And now we can say and API endpoint column, and we can copy this one over here, right? And we will do the same thing for my secret. And my secret, I'm already telling you, it will not be available in the front end. So let me copy this bit, and that one will not be available in the front end. So over here we can say my secret, and I will put my secret, oops, my bad. And over here I will say API endpoint column, and I will do this copy paste. So you will be able to see that on the back end, let me just kill this one and restart. You will see that on the back end will have access to both the public and the server side. The front end will only have access to the API endpoint. The my secret is something for the server only. But look what I'm doing here, and this is something you can make a mistake as well. I did in the past, so I'm one of those that make those mistakes, which is I'm sending by mistake a secret that should be only available for our server side. I'm sending it to my client. And over here, Next.js is protecting you. But if you do it like this, there is not much that Next.js can do to protect you. So if we now refresh this page, you will see that I have my API endpoint, my secret, I don't have anything on the UI, which is great. But then what I sent from my get server side props, well, I have it over there as 1234. So honestly, take care about this, because I did this mistake in the past and I saw more people doing this mistake. So something that I usually warn people is when you are doing a code review of one of your colleagues or even your own code review, it's nice that you go and do something like my secret and do a full search on the application, and on every single place that you see that, make sure that it's expected that you are doing what you are doing and that you are not sending this my secret to your front end, because in this case it will mean that my clients will know my database password security issue, right? So as I promised to you, I will now stop this and I will just migrate what we have over here, okay, for example this one, and I will change this one to have my environment variables as a .env file. So let me go over here and I will do .env, and now sorry, and now in this .env file, first we will have my step equals to build. So let's go to my env, and if you see in the documentation, let me just show you the documentation of .env, you will do require .env.config in order to have .env, .env. You will have .env require .env.config, okay? So when you want to use this, what we need to do is to go over here to our next config and and do the following. We put .env.config. So right now, instead of using what I have over here in the cross env, I will use the config, okay? So if I now run just the build, I will run the build using this configuration from .env. And if I go to my .env file, I have my step equals to build, okay? If I then go back to my next.config.js, okay, and I just remove, where is my .config? Okay, so my .config, and I remove this bit, right? And I go back over here and I keep this one, right? You will see that my configuration for the build, it will have the build command, okay? Or we can even do better. We can even go to over here and say xxxxx, okay? I can go to the next configuration and put it back. I build our application, so we will have a new value that was set by the .env file, and then I will run the application without using the .env file. So you can see over here that my step is xxx, which is from this .config file. So now to run our application, I will do a mix. I will run the application using cross-env. So I build the application using .env and I will run the application using cross-env. So this shows you that they are really similar. You can use one or the other. It's literally a matter of preference and the features that they provide to you. You may prefer one, you may prefer the other, but at least over here you can see, wrong one. If I go here, you can see that the my step is xxx. So you may use .env, you may use cross-env. Usually my rule is when I start to have more than 2 to 3 environment variables, I usually change to .env. Otherwise, I just use cross-env because it's easier to use. So I hope these answer some of the questions that you were making to me or asking to me about environment variables in Next.js. They are quite powerful. You just need to take into consideration that your runtime configurations will only be available to components with get initial props and get server-side props. If it's a normal component without any of those two, well, you don't have runtime configuration like you are used to create a React app, okay? So I'm already recording also the video for the full demo where we will have pages with get server-side props, some pages with get static paths and static props, and some pages using SWR. And that's mainly the reason I did this video right now, because I was ending up explaining a lot of the times why I was using an environment variable here and there. And so you have this one as a basics now. So when you watch the next video that I will try to put Tuesday or Wednesday, most probably Wednesday, you will have immediately the knowledge about environment variables and how to use them in your own company. So I hope to see you. Well, let's try Wednesday, okay? So bye-bye and see you Wednesday.